He's trying to tell his mom what to do.
Here. I didn't say anything. Oh, yeah. This is going to be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Should I officially kick us off here?
Yes.
1 minute.
Yeah, we could go.
1 minute and counting. Yep.
1 minute and counting, yes. Anybody know how to juggle? All right, well, I will officially begin our program here, even as we know it's about 1 minute early, and we know folks will be coming in. I'm Pastor Kate Costa. I serve as pastor here at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, and we are just delighted to welcome Joan and Loki to come and to share their wisdom with us today. I was very interested and glad to hear of some of the connections that they have with the Lutheran Church. This September, they will be doing a program with the Lower Susquehanna Synod at Gettysburg Seminary, helping to train pastors in the kind of activism and the kind of love shown through actions that we are trying to embody here. And I was also very interested to hear that she goes and speaks twice a year with Lutheran college students who come to DC to study about advocacy and activism and to be a part of our community here. So we give thanks. I am just so grateful to have this really unique gathering gathered together. And Lori Strauss suggested that perhaps we should start by just acknowledging that we have taken time out of our busy lives to be here. And so she invited us to turn to one another, share your name if you come from a church community or some kind of affiliation like that, if you'd like to share that affiliation with somebody that you don't know behind or in front of you, and then just share why is this important enough for you to give time out of your day on a busy weekend to be here. So if you would turn to someone close to you that you don't know yet and just share quickly, I will give you about 1 minute to do that. Well, we know why you're here.
Yeah, sure. Easy enough.
I think we've met, son.
Yeah.
Your time is up. Your 60 seconds have officially ended, so we will gather us back together again.
Quiet!
Mom.
Please gather back together again, or Joan will have to use her playground voice. We have in common that we both only have boys. I have 2 boys, and I think that is plenty. Joan has 5 boys, so she knows how to use her playground voice. But I'd like to begin us with prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Joan and to Loki. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks, for you have gathered us together to be your servants, to speak truth and justice in this world. We thank you that you have made us your wondrous, diverse creation, and yet we mourn where we have gone wrong, where we have not spoken out in favor of all your creation, especially those who are oppressed, imprisoned, and left behind. Lord, speak through our congregation, speak through our conversations today, that we might be people of wisdom in this world. In your Son's holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you again for being here, and I'll turn the conversation over to Joan Trumpauer and to Loki. Other way around.
Loki leads it.
Yeah.
He tells Mama when to talk.
No, yeah. I can't tell you anything.
You keep trying, though, boy.
Well, my daughter just called. It's her birthday, and I couldn't answer. I was like, oh no. We've been playing phone tag today. But she turned 25. 26. She turned 26.
Big girl now.
Yes.
She can tell you what to do.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Does that work? We appreciate you all being here. Special shout out to your soror who's sitting here. Thank you for being here. My mom's a sorority.
Where's
Oh,
my
sorority
soror?
sisters. Oh, okay, we got two of them here. All right, right on.
Sorors, raise your hand so I can see you. Okay, thank you.
Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So
None but the best.
that's right.
Give
Appreciate
our
it.
signal.
So this is, we're going to walk through my mom's story, and there's video clips that we're going to show. And the first one, we're going to lead off actually with this video clip. So I want to kind of set the stage, take you back to 1950s, 1960s. And this is your friends talking about growing up under Jim Crow and
Okay,
segregation.
and if we can dim the lights.
No, we're fine,
for
Mom.
this.
You don't have to direct this thing.
in the 40s, in these German-occupied countries, if a Jew walking on the sidewalk did not get off the sidewalk when a German was coming and take his cap off, he was risking his life. So we had that same thing over here.
I always wondered why I had to go through the back door of the public library, why I could not go into the stacks to get my own books, why I had to go to the colored water fountain.
In Sears, I can remember white ladies and colored women bathrooms. You could not sit at Cress's counters. We used to go downtown and to buy candy or something. We couldn't sit at the counter.
We couldn't even go downtown and eat in a lot of the restaurants downtown in D.C.
They said we were supposedly equals. We were being treated that way, and I suddenly off this white person. They had all kinds of things at their disposal to do me in, and there was nothing I could do about it.
He said, you ran that light. My dad said, no, sir, I didn't run the light, it was yellow. Morris, I said to you, you ran that light. My dad didn't say anything. And he looked at us in the back seat, and I guess we looked like a nice little family. And he said, Morris, you like a good, so I'm gonna let you off this time.
It was a separate and unequal society, basically buttressed by local customs and laws.
But you know, that was just the way things were. And you want to go, what do you mean that's the way things were?
I met whites all over who had questions raised. I later met blacks who, when they had questions raised, their parents had to tell them, it may be wrong, but don't you try to do anything about it. This is in God's hands. Here's how you protect yourself. Maybe you shouldn't ride the bus so much if that upsets you.
Your parents did that, but they also told you that it would come to an end. Because it was wrong. Anything that's that wrong can't last.
Anything that wrong can't last. That was Reuben Anderson, who was the first black Supreme Court justice in the state of Mississippi.
And he was quite the dude around campus, too, ladies.
We're in church, Mom. Yeah. But anything that wrong can't last. And here was this system that was so firmly ingrained, and yet you all had the audacity to say, we're going to put an end to this.
And we did.
And you did.
But unfortunately, history tends to repeat itself.
Right. And you grew up here in Northern Virginia. And I think, for a lot of people who didn't grow up here at that time, what was Northern Virginia like? Because a lot of people go, well, no, this is the liberal bastion. This is okay. We don't have to worry about things here.
It was totally segregated by law.
And you had Klan posters on telephone poles.
Klan posters. Even when I got out of college, I remember Klan posters in the 60s.
And then the American Nazi Party was headquartered
in Arlington. And when I was, after 4th grade, my parents moved over to East Falls Church, and the American Nazi Party headquarters were about 2 blocks away, and we wouldn't walk on that side of the street where there was a sidewalk. Those dogs might come over the fence, and we'd walk on the other side with no sidewalk.
And I always find a lot of people, we're going to get to the amazing stories and photos and those sort of things. 'Cause my mom was kind of the Forrest Gump of civil rights. Although you've never seen the movie, so you have no idea what I'm saying. But
He's talking about me.
yeah, see, that whole nonviolence thing, that ended when she had children, right? The civil rights movement.
Boy, take off your belt and hand it to me and bend over. Just love taps, you know.
There's a lot of love taps.
You deserved them.
Uh-huh.
You earned them.
That was my brothers that deserved it. But when you were 10, every year you'd go and visit your grandmother in Oconee, Georgia.
Which was a company-owned logging town. It wasn't that fancy resort that it is now.
Yeah, and then but that was a seminal moment for you. Can you take us back to what happened when you were 10 years old?
Well, I had the same playmate every summer, and we decided to sneak off and go where we weren't supposed to, down the dirt road through the colored section of town. And as bad as the white section was, you know, old houses and all that, this was so much worse. And folks saw these two, this was before Emmett Till, but those folks saw these two little white girls coming down the street or the road, and they just made themselves scarce. They didn't want to know anything about us in case they got asked. Well, that was creepy enough, but we got to the colored school, and it was just a one-room shack. It had never had an ounce of paint on it. No glass or screens in the windows, just wooden shutters, no electricity, no running water. It was awful. And I knew out the other side of town was the fanciest building for miles around. A brand new brick school for the white kids with all the amenities. And I knew this was not right. This was not doing what we learned in Sunday school about loving your neighbor as yourself and treating people the way you want to be treated. And I knew then, couldn't have put it in words, but I knew when I had the chance to do something to make the South, didn't care about the Yankees, but to make the South the best it could be for everybody down here, I would seize the moment. And that came with the sit-ins when I was a college student.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you said, you know, you saw this realities of separate but equal, and you said to yourself, you know, this is wrong and I'm going to do something about it. You didn't say this is wrong, oh well, what can I do, and it's too big or anything like that. You said, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Now, this has always perplexed me because you said you learned this in Sunday school. Tell them by the way, who your Sunday school teacher and her husband was.
My Sunday school teachers, well, her husband's name was John Glenn. And I reckon y'all know who John Glenn was. And I would sit with them every week for church service.
Yeah, see, I told you, Forrest Gump, right? we were actually, when we shot the film, we were at Tougaloo's campus, and we're walking along, and she goes, and that's where I had breakfast with Marlon Brando. I'm like, wait, what? And I
he was just another person on campus.
Yeah, I asked my dad, I'm like, do you remember Marlon Brando being there? He goes, yeah, I remember him hitting on her the entire time. I'm like, oh. But
I was better looking back then.
But a lot of people have read those same verses. What makes you so special?
Nothing. I just took them seriously and followed up on what I believed.
Yeah. So you get your chance. 1960. February 1st, 1960 is the first of the student sit-ins. There have been other sit-ins before, of course, but this was kind of what kicked off the student movement in Greensboro, the A&T 4.
Yeah.
But it was actually now, the 4 guys get credit for sitting down, but who actually came up with the idea?
The girls had been at college, of course. It wasn't the guys who did it. It was the young ladies, as usual.
And the guys just jumped the gun and get all the credit.
Yeah, of course the guys got all the credit.
But now you were going to school at Duke University.
I was at Duke University. Mama insisted that I go there. Wasn't where I wanted to go, but I went there. Well, at least it'll get me away from Mama.
Yeah.
Some of y'all have had that feeling. And
she wanted you to go there because?
It was segregated in the
Right.
South. Mama was from rural Georgia, and she was a product of the environment she grew up in. Well, that was her big mistake. The sit-ins got started. The Presbyterian chaplain at Duke, every week we had a little meeting of the students, not in the chapel, but administrative, well, somewhere or other. And we'd come, and he told us one week that next week there would be some students involved in the demonstrations in town come to talk to us about them. Well, we had to keep it quiet. We didn't want the rowdies to show up and cause, start something. We didn't want the police to come arrest us, and we didn't want the administration to lock us out of the building. So these students came, several of them, well-dressed, well-spoken. They explained in moral and legal terms about the demonstrations in town. And then, shock and awe, as we say today, they invited us to join them. So a few of us did. And that led to the picket lines. Then it led to the lunch counters. Then it led to the jail cells and the courtroom. And ultimately, it led to the U.S. Supreme Court, which overturned our convictions, saying that demonstrating was freedom of speech. And police couldn't just come in and arrest you. The management had to close down the place completely. And you still refused to leave after the lights were off. Then the management could ask the police to come in and arrest you. But that was a ways down the road. And the administration, we got back to campus, my roommate and me who'd been in jail, and there was a note to go over to the dean's office. So we went, and when we went in, she locked the door and jingled the keys just so we'd know she had locked us in. Have you called your parents yet? There's the phone. And found out just a few years ago we'd have been expelled, except the university professors said they'd go on strike if they kicked us out. So I finished my year, got my credit hours, and then I dropped out. Went back to D.C. and got one of those so-called good government jobs.
But before you left, the students at A&T, well, not A&T, North Carolina College, asked you to do something.
Yeah, the students at North Carolina College asked me when they heard I was going back to Washington, D.C., they said, well, we haven't heard anything from the Howard University students since our spring meeting in Raleigh where the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was formed. Go up to Howard and find out what's happening and write us a letter and let us know. Well, I didn't quite know where Howard was, but I found my way there. Walking around campus asking, anybody know anybody involved in sympathy pickets or something for the students down south? Well, no, but there was a group that was meeting, and I forget exactly when, maybe that evening or maybe in a couple days, that were planning sit-ins. And they asked me to join them. And since I had a little experience in sit-ins, a couple times, and they were planning to demonstrate in Arlington, where I was from. So they really wanted me to go with them. So we came on over to Arlington to People's Drugstore. Some of you may remember People's. Then we walked up the road to, when nothing much happened, half of us walked up the road to Drug Fair, another one of those places that's not there anymore, and sat in, and the management didn't ask the police to come in, and the police stayed outside. And a lot of these local drugstore chains were started by liberal New York Jewish families that had come down for jobs during the Depression, those good government jobs, and they personally had no problem with us sitting there. They just weren't going to get us arrested. And state law required that not only the people who sat together, but whoever enabled them, like the store managers, they could be arrested too. Well, we called a break in about a week, and so the government officials and the store managers could talk, and then the county prosecuting attorney said, well, he wasn't going to enforce the state law. He wasn't going to arrest folks, so once they weren't threatened with arrest, the drugstore managers, they served us. They weren't going to jail, but they had no problem serving us. And so that took care. Then the surrounding communities like Alexandria and Falls Church and Fairfax County said, well, if Arlington's not going to enforce the law, we aren't either. And that took care of the eateries in Northern Virginia. So what's next? We wanted to go to the beach because, you know, all that water is segregated, or at least the sand and by it is. And, but that was, the beaches were all segregated, but that was a little bit far of a commute if you were having to go over every day and come back. So we took on Glen Echo Amusement Park.
And the American Nazi Party had shown up at one of the sit-ins in Arlington, but then also showed up at Glen Echo Park.
Oh, yeah.
But there was another group of people at Glen Echo Park in that community there that was helping you.
Yeah,
And,
liberal New York Jews.
right. So on one side you had Jews still with the tattoos on their arms, and then you had the Nazis with the swastikas on their arms.
Yep.
Right there, and you guys were right in the middle of that.
Yep, we were.
So then you finish that, and then along comes the Freedom Rides. But before that, there is a couple of college students, Charlene Hunter Galt and Hamilton Holmes in the University of Georgia, that are trying to integrate the University of Georgia.
Under court order.
Right, and facing the tear gas and so forth. And you felt that integration, that this wasn't fair, right? That integration should be a two-way street. So you get this idea, you cook up this idea that maybe you should go to a black school, what we now would call an HBCU, right? And so you ran this by John Lewis, Chuck
Ethnic
Ledoux,
leadership at their fall conference.
right? And what
They
did they tell
agreed
you?
it was a good idea. Someone said, well, if you're going to do it, you may as well go to Mississippi. Those students haven't done anything yet, meaning they haven't had sit-ins. Maybe you could help them get started. Now imagine sending a white Southern girl to Mississippi to get the black students involved in sit-ins. Sounds crazy, but that's what they did.
But I also think that speaks volumes of the level of trust that John and Chuck and others had in you, that you weren't just performative. You weren't just showing up for a single protest. You were actually had been arrested.
My picture in the paper.
Yeah, you'd been arrested multiple times. You were consistently doing the work. So there was a level of trust that you would actually do what needed to be done, and not cut bait and run if things got too hot.
Yeah.
So, but now the Freedom Rides, because now you're going to get the opportunity, a free ticket, right?
Yeah, free ticket to Mississippi with the Freedom Rides. I applied to Tougaloo College and got accepted, even though my high school back here, Annandale High, refused to send my transcripts to that school, but Tougaloo understood what that school meant, and so they said, we'll accept you on your Duke transcripts. And so now I have to get down there.
This was an idea that caught the imagination of the country. However, the civil rights community thought it was a bit of a lark. They thought, oh, right, we're just going to ride on buses through the South, for a couple of months. It was almost seen as like a vacation. And some of the people who actually participated initially were viewed as, people who were just, slackers. They didn't want to do the hard work of going and demonstrating in front of, hardcore places, so they were just going to take a bus.
I think we knew from the start it could be dangerous. On the other hand, maybe to break the tension, maybe half thinking it, we were teasing Hank and some that, here you're going off on this all expense paid vacation. Good way to end the semester, buddy.
How I spent my summer in 1961. Let me tell you the ways.
They put together a small group of 13 riders, I think it was 13, who left Washington on 2 separate buses, making their way through the Upper South. In the Upper South, they were attacked a few times. A couple of people were beaten up, arrested, most notably in Rock Hill, South Carolina. But really all hell broke loose when they got to Alabama.
And all of a sudden, it made national news, and everybody realized this was not just a walk in the park. This was the next stage of the revolution.
I had already had a taste. I had seen the violence. I just barely escaped the Klan. So I had no illusions whatsoever about what was going to happen next. I didn't know anything about Anniston, Alabama, and then we were told that we are literally going into the belly of the beast. Anniston was a hotbed of Klan activity. And as a matter of fact, Jim Farmer, who was a pretty good stump speaker, spoke that night and told a joke about Anniston in terms of foretelling what we were going to be in for. And he said, there was this bus driver driving a Greyhound bus, and as he got maybe 3 or 4 miles from Anniston, he heard this knock-knock thumping on the side of the bus, so he pulled over to see what it was, and as he opened the door, the Greyhound had gotten down off of the side of the bus and wanted to come inside. And so he asked and says, why do you want to do that? He said, we getting ready to go into Anniston. And there are variations of that joke of, he said, one preacher said, Lord, we're getting ready to go down to Alabama and we want you to be with us. And then there was silence. And he said, Lord, did you hear me? I want you to be with us. So he heard that voice, I'll go with you as far as Anniston. So all kinds of joke about how dangerous it was going to be. And surely enough, when we got maybe a few miles outside of Anniston, we'd all had been singing on the bus, and as we did that from time to time. A bus coming from Anniston stopped on the opposite side of the highway, and the 2 bus drivers got out and spoke. And the driver of our bus got back on and looked at us and just kind of smiled. As we got into Anniston, the streets were deserted. No one. And it was telling us this is not good.
A mob firebombed the bus as churchgoers brought their children to watch the Freedom Riders burn alive on Mother's Day. Riders were able to escape, only to be beaten with baseball bats until the local authorities finally stepped in. Freedom Riders were attacked 2 more times in Birmingham and Montgomery, where it appeared things would come to an end. But a call back to my mother in D.C. to send more riders, and a team led by Diane Nash in Nashville, re-energized everyone. However, my mother and the Freedom Riders were now entering Mississippi, a place many would call the heart of darkness. So in I gotta turn mine back on. I muted myself. Oh, there we go. So in Montgomery, they get trapped in this church. Dr. King's with them actually, and the Klan's throwing rocks through the window. The police are surrounding that. Tear gas is going in, and they're only allowed, each family unit is only allowed a single phone call.
And it was timed.
And it was timed. And you actually get a call
Yeah.
from Paul Dietrich, one of your NAG Howard group.
Yeah, well, he knew I had a phone right by my bed in my efficiency apartment. So he called me and said, this is more or less what he said, Joan, this is Paul. I can't talk. We're trapped in the church in Montgomery. Send more riders. Click. So I placed a few phone calls and got 5 of us from the Howard group, including my buddy for the rest of his life, Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, and we flew down to New Orleans and took the train to Jackson. Well, the Illinois Central headed to Chicago, got off in Jackson, walked into one of the waiting rooms, and took a seat, and promptly got arrested.
Yeah.
So
Captain Ray was there.
Captain Ray came in, move on and move out. Y'all hear me? You gonna do it? You're under arrest. And out to the paddy wagon. Now, what gave me faith that things were going to work out in the end, it was when I went to step down from the paddy wagon. Big step, and I'm a sweet, short thing. Or I was then, sweet. And the officer, wouldn't have happened if I'd been black, but the white officer took my arm to help me step down and said, "We don't want anything to happen to you, chillin'," and that gave me faith that in the end it was all going to work out. So it was off to the city jail, and then it was over to the county jail, and that got really crowded. We were down to less than 3 square feet of space per prisoner. There were over 30 of us in a cell for 4. And I don't mean 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. I mean 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. Right cozy when it's time to sleep. One girl always slept curled up in the dripping shower stall. But they had to do something with us. They thought about putting us in the cattle barns at the fairgrounds. They did that later with a group. But they took the prisoners on death row at Parchman Penitentiary, the most dreaded prison in the country, sort of like Angola is now. And they put the regular death row prisoners out doing field work and put us on death row trying to frighten us, but didn't frighten me. I knew their game. It was roomier. It was cleaner, and the food was so much better without that added protein from the bugs on the floor. It was free room and board for the summer.
Courtesy of the state.
Courtesy of the state, and I knew when I would stay until my last chance to get out before time for classes to start at Tougaloo.
Now your parents didn't know you were in Mississippi, and
Of course, you're not going to tell your parents everything.
You
never did.
I always did, Mother.
BS.
So, but you did actually get a letter from your dad.
I got a letter when I was in Jackson from my daddy saying, "We were surprised to hear on the radio tonight that you were in Jackson, Mississippi." So
off to Tougaloo.
Yeah, so then I went up, when I got out of jail, I went straight out to Tougaloo.
And of course, this is my favorite story, so you have to tell this. Your first night on campus.
Well, the word had not gone forth that there was a white girl in the dormitory. And back then, they had some of you may remember, they had the restrooms down in the middle of the hall, not these little suites now, 2 rooms, sleeping rooms and a restroom in between. So Mother Nature called me in the middle of the night. I was tiptoeing down the hall quietly. The lights were dimmed to save electricity. I had on this swishy little thing we called a shorty, short night sleeping garment. And I was tiptoeing down. And Mother Nature had called a girl at the other end of the hall, and she was tiptoeing down too. And she saw me, and she screamed bloody murder. She thought she was seeing a ghost. Well, she startled me, and I screamed back, but Mother Nature won, and we made it to the restroom, and I think by morning, everybody in that dorm knew there was a white girl up there.
But this was pretty scandalous, having you on campus. I mean,
oh, yeah.
The state of Mississippi actually tried to shut down the school because a white woman on campus with a bunch of black men.
Yeah.
Right.
But our school charter was older than the state law, so they couldn't close us. And I stayed,
Yeah.
got in some good trouble, as the saying goes now, and I graduated with honors.
Well, that's good, with honors, no less. Wow.
Surprise, your
Yeah.
mama.
Yeah. But it was an interesting experience for a lot of folks there. There's a story you told once when you came back. So some folks were kind of wondering, are you just on your semester abroad, sort of lark, coming down to Mississippi and such. But then when you came back, they're like, oh, she's for real. But now you had this new freshman class, and you were in line in the cafeteria. Do you remember this?
And people reaching out to feel my hair. You had to see what it felt like,
Yeah, because they had never had this opportunity to be this close to a white person in such an intimate setting, that they were willing to risk touching your hair even. But Tougaloo College was unique. It was this,
it was the center of the civil
Yeah.
rights movement in the state of Mississippi.
It was the only safe place that you could do civil rights. And Medgar Evers, the field secretary for the NAACP, the Dr. King of Mississippi, he would come to campus, and
A few other people, Dr. King was there, and Ralph Bunch, was there, and Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, a few people.
Pete Seeger. Yeah.
Pete Seeger,
Harry Belafonte, he came around.
yeah.
Yeah. So you met Dr. King and that sort of stuff. We're going to bypass that for the sake of time. You can tell that story later individually if you want. But I do think it's interesting to talk about Dr. King from the standpoint of, we think of Dr. King today, in such reverence. You college kids were a bunch of little punks, and you didn't quite see him the same way as other people did.
No, we thought he was a great spokesperson for the movement, but he wasn't involved in enough action. He needed to get involved in more direct action, and a sit-in or two would help. Yeah. But eventually he did, but that was years later.
And you were there for the March on Washington even. You helped.
I worked in the Washington, D.C. March on Washington office.
Yeah. And so you were there for the I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
But that wasn't your cup of tea.
No. Well, the speeches that everybody gave had to be censored by the organizers so that they wouldn't upset the Kennedys too much. And that I Have a Dream thing was not in the censored speech. Now, John Lewis, in his speech, he had to take out stuff like, we're going to march non-violently through the South like Sherman marched through Georgia. That was way too radical, had to go. And some other stuff, but that I Have a Dream thing, it was not a call to action. It was just a pie-in-the-sky dream. And big deal, but so it went.
And the Selma to Montgomery March, when he gives the speech in the steps of the state capitol there.
How long? Not long. That was a call to action. And he gave it in the same spot where the governor had stood denying admission for black students to the state college. Yeah. But that was a bit better. It was a call to action. So
you also ran into a particular challenge doing civil rights in Mississippi because you could get people killed. And your roommate Joyce Ladner would talk about anytime you'd go out with her in a car.
Excuse me, folks. Yeah. Man, we'd go out, and if there was any chance of, the headlights of a car or something, somebody passing us, spotting me, I was on the floor of the car, back seat, floor of the car, with a coat over me and people's feet on top of me. And that wasn't too comfortable. And then Joyce, my roommate, she always had a black scarf in her purse that could be put all over my blonde hair. So I was a danger to folks, but we got along.
And you still figured things out. You guys you still got enough action. And in particular, May 28th, 1963.
Yeah,
It's the Jackson Woolworth sit-in.
yeah.
I want to play that video, unless you got something else to say, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right.
Play it.
You sure?
I talk enough.
All right. Because you felt like you wanted to say something, but are you going to say something about this?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
This new movement would explode on May 28, 1963, when John Salter and Medgar Evers took the Jackson boycott to the next level. In all, 14 people would participate in what would become one of the most famous and violent sit-ins of the civil rights movement.
I've heard at various times from the reporter, the cameraman, and the son of one of the reporters that this was the most terrifying, frightening event they covered in the civil rights movement. Now, guess they weren't in Birmingham or Montgomery with the Freedom Riders, but they got around, and this to them was the worst.
When the three individuals, Perlina Lewis, Memphis Norman, and Ann Moody, sat down at the white counter, nothing happened. Now, Joan, interestingly, was not supposed to be part of this demonstration.
And he said, well, let's go check in what's happening at Woolworth.
They had no idea that this environment had turned volatile until they walked in the store. And it was right at that moment that a thug, a former police officer, had come in and pulled Memphis Norman, the one black male, off of his stool, knocked him onto the floor, and began kicking him mercilessly. Joan was then stuck in the situation wondering what's going to happen next. Ann Moody had been pulled off of her stool and thrown against some of the counters. Perlina Lewis was also pulled from the stool and was down on her knees right by the counter when the police officer came on the scene. Both of them rushed back to the counter, and so that the demonstration would continue. Joan sees all this and realizes, first of all, she is beginning to communicate with the demonstrators. She sees a man with a knife walk by Ann Moody, and she calls out, Annie, he's got a knife. And all of a sudden she's identified with the people at the counter. Who's this white girl talking to those black girls, you know? So all of a sudden she realizes that she's in danger.
But then I sat down. That's when I became a problem.
She walked through that mob in the Woolworth store. And they realized, of course, immediately where she stood.
She joins Perlina and Annie at the counter, the first white to join the demonstration. And at this, the crowd is just incensed. They become like hornets. They start screaming at her.
I went immediately to the lunch counter to sit with Joan and Annie Moody.
When Salter joined, the crowd turned violent. He was knocked in the back of his head with brass knuckles. There was a student who put his cigarette out on the back of Salter's neck. There were several cigarette, and you can still see it to this day. If you look on the back of his neck, he has scars in the shape of a cigarette. They threw pepper and water mixture into his eyes. Things were just going out of control. And at that point, Joan has said that she believed that they were not going to make it out alive. None of them were going to make it out alive.
But here I am. Now, the photographer, the TV photographer who took the pictures of, cameraman, I guess is the word, who took the pictures of Memphis being kicked, he was knocked to the floor and his camera broken. The press frequently gets attacked just as fast, if not faster, than demonstrators.
Now, it said that you weren't actually supposed to be there. You were what was called a spotter down the street at a picket.
A picket line that was supposed to divert the police attention down that way while the sit-in got settled in. And I just sort of could blend into the white crowd on the sidewalk. But to our surprise, the picket line got arrested, not the sit-in students. So after they were arrested, and I called back to Medgar's office, I had a dime for the payphone. You all remember, some of you remember payphones. And that's when me and the other spotter decided to go down and check out Woolworth's.
Yeah, so then you walk in and you see all this unfolding. And you have this opportunity when you walk in and you see the mob and you see your friends, you could turn around and just walk out. They don't know you're there. Huh?
But you don't desert your friends.
Right. And so you go through the mob, you sit down. They grab you, reported that they grabbed you by the hair, they jerk you off the stool, and then wrapped you up, and the guy marches you out. You get loose, because they get outside, and all these police officers are outside, and there's even a bigger mob outside. And you get loose, and you go back through the mob again and sit down.
You're not going to desert your friends.
Right. And then John shows up. Now, Medgar wanted to go, but John said you would get killed. And he would be. 2 weeks later, he'd be shot in the back by Byron De La Beckwith while standing in his driveway.
Yeah.
In his hands were T-shirts that said, "Jim Crow must go."
And Kennedy had just spoken about civil rights on the national TV.
Yeah. You talked about once that you had this sense of an out-of-body experience.
Yeah. Like the real me had left the body and was up above like a guardian angel, and it was just, the shell of me, sitting there on the stool. Yeah. The unimportant part.
Right. And it's a question always gets asked is, were you afraid?
Of course not. Fear paralyzes your brain and keeps you from thinking about what you need to do to stay as safe as possible in the situation. Never give away to fear. It'll get you killed. Still true.
But you could have been killed.
Oh, yeah. But you got to die for something. At some point, it's better to die for a cause you believe in than to get run over by a car when you're crossing the street with the light in the crosswalk.
So this is 1963, and there's one more segment I want to show.
Okay.
But tell us about 1963. A lot of people think, obviously, the March on Washington, this big glorious moment, but 63 was not a great year.
No, they had police dogs and fire hoses on the students in Danville, Virginia, then down in Birmingham. My mind is going blank.
Yeah, you're right.
Then the March on Washington, then the sit-in,
then
Medgar's assassination, then the one good moment, the March on Washington, and the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church followed that, and then the President of the United States is assassinated. I leave anything out?
No.
I got it. Oh, I got it this time.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
But I mean, it was an ugly year.
It was a bad year, one of the worst years. Yeah. But there was that March on Washington.
But you guys kept pushing on.
Yeah.
Persevered. And so I want to show this part about the 16th Street Baptist Church.
Before everyone falls asleep.
On September 15th, 1963, tragedy would befall the most innocent of victims in the battle for racial equality, when a bomb exploded at the 16th Street Baptist Church.
We've all seen the footage of people getting sprayed by the water hoses and things like that. Well, that was the protests that were going on at that time, and they were essentially being staged from the 16th Street Baptist Church because it was a downtown church, and they could gather there and then leave from there for their protest. And so that's what was happening. Well, the Klan didn't like that, so what they did is they planted a bomb underneath the steps on the side of that church, and it blew up at about 10:22 in the morning. In fact, these girls were getting ready. There was a youth service that morning, and in fact, the title of the lesson was called "The Love That Forgives." And the bomb blew up and killed those 4 girls.
Time for sadness. There was nothing to celebrate. Glass that we picked up out of the gutters at the 16th Street Baptist Church, the day that 3 of the little girls who had been blown up there were buried. And the police shot over the heads of the people who came out of the church to disperse the mob, right?
We attended the funeral. We were standing outside, and we were going to follow the cortege until Ed King and Diane Nash pointed and showed us the National Guard standing with guns aimed down at us in the streets. The National Guard, who had been nationalized by the President of the United States, had rebel flags on their uniforms. Mm-hmm. And I was holding this American flag, which was not liked. They just fell in love with the American flag recently in the South. And so this flag was a sign of resistance that I was holding. So you could see them standing all up around with the guns drawn.
Where were they, on top of the church?
Yeah, all around.
I didn't look up at it.
And so Ed and Diane said, look, 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 look. The same way they did at Medgar's funeral in Jackson when John Doe came out and started screaming, yelling, said, you must stop because they're going to shoot you, pointing to the guns aimed at people in the streets there on Ferris Street. It would have been like Sharpeville Massacre.
I'm not sure they were going to shoot us.
Oh,
we were standing.
You're not sure?
No, the church, you're talking about during the time the funeral was going on?
Yes, ma'am. They had just blown the church up, Joyce.
Yeah, but
what makes you think they were
Martin Luther King was inside,
so
preaching
he was killed.
The funeral.
He was killed.
Listen, let me speak, please. Will you indulge me a little? No, there were a lot of people standing in front of that church. And I don't know whether they were going to shoot or not, but if there was any restraint to be had on that day, they would have had it. We bring from these experiences different feelings, impressions, and so on.
Well, this is reality I'm dealing with.
Well, so I would have been shot too.
Yes, ma'am.
That's just the way they were in college, those two sisters.
The story continues into '64. This is Freedom Summer. You had a situation with the Klan where they almost killed you.
Yeah.
The March
You left out about me sleeping in Andrew Young's bed.
Well, yeah, I did.
He was in Dr. King's room.
That just makes it sound worse, Mom. It's a great story, but we're not going to tell it right now. We're running short on time.
Oh, we're
but,
low. Okay.
but I mean,
next time.
Yeah. Then you had the March Against Fear, and the Summit of Montgomery March as well. All these events you're involved in. And I remember when we were doing this film, I asked you, are you a hero? And you said, absolutely not. I said, well, what makes you so special?
Nothing.
He said, you're right. It's exactly what you said. I saw something was wrong and decided to do something about it. And it takes all of us to make a difference. We just have to make the choice. And, you made the right choice, Mom.
Thank you, son.
Yeah.
You approving of your mother for once?
Maybe even twice. This might be the second time. But, just keep on keeping on.
Keeping on.
Right. And if you guys can end Jim Crow and segregation, then just imagine what we can do with what we're facing. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for your story. Very educational, very inspiring. We really appreciate your time here today. My name is Patricio Virgili. I'm one of the moderators here. I'll be moderating the Q&A session today. I'll start with the first question, and then we'll ask for a few questions from our online audience, if they have any, and also we'll ask some questions we'll see if our audience here in person has any questions. For in-person questions, if you could just please raise your hand, and I'll call on folks, and we'll bring you over to the mic so you can ask your questions. If you could just speak into the mic clearly so we can hear you here as well as our online audience joining us today. I'll just kick it off with one question, if you don't mind. We have one opening question. Joan and Loki, this is a question we received from a registrant. What is your hope for the future in light of the current administration working to undo decades of progress? Even before this administration, we still had so far to go, but undoing DEI, removing Black Americans from positions of influence and authority moves the progress decades backwards. So what is your hope for the future in light of the current administration?
We shall overcome. We have to vote.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm hopeful. I mean, we saw what happened on No King's Day, right? The millions of people that showed up and showed out and made sure their voices were heard, that was powerful. And so that gives me hope. You know, we're seeing, we're starting to see that some organizations standing up against ICE. People are capturing what's going on. So the reality is in front of us. And I think, you know, there's, hopefully, my hope is that more people just take the talents that they have and put it out there and to want to make that change, but also to be a safe harbor for people, to really develop that empathy that is needed to have that understanding for what people are going through. Even though you might not be experiencing it, it is real. So, but I'm hopeful. I mean, because we have the blueprint. We already know it can be done, and it will happen again.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions for the audience?
Are you all just tired of listening to us?
It's all right there.
Yeah, we can bring over a mic for you.
So I do have a question. Did you ever experience any resistance from anyone in the Black community? So I know it seems like everyone was very welcoming, but was there ever a point where someone said, like, I don't want this white woman, you know, participating in these activities, or, you know, who does she think she is? Did you ever experience any of that?
Not that I recollect now. I don't think so. There was sort of surprise that I was there, but no real resistance.
Yeah. Ella Baker.
Well, Ella Baker, she questioned, you know, I got a letter from her that I was participating here, there, and elsewhere, and maybe I should restrict myself, you know.
Dial it back a little bit.
What?
Dial it back a little bit.
Dial it back a little bit. But I only participated, and I let her know, in things that I was invited and encouraged to get involved in. I never just went in and said, here I am, and I'm going to join you. I was invited.
And why was that important to you? To not just impose yourself? What was your philosophy on that?
Well, the people who were in charge or who suffered the problem, they were the ones who should decide what should be done about it. And then if they ask you to join them, you should follow their directions. Now, if they ask you point blank, do you think we should do this or do that, then you could speak what you thought, but they were the ones in charge.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. My question is about one of my queer icons in the movement, Bayard Rustin, and his influence on the civil rights movement and helping Martin Luther King Jr. But, because I think part of the struggle for me with Bayard is, you know, he had to, today we talk about intersectionality, so it was hard for him to maybe be in the movement for, as an African American, and then also hide kind of his gay side so that the movement could go on. And so I'm wondering if you would have any thoughts about Bayard. I would love to hear them. But then also how this kind of plays out today. So there's a million sort of fights and wars and intersections that we can all be at. And so I'm wondering if there's any advice that you have for how do you fight all these fights? Was that a thing in the civil rights movement that you were able to battle all these fronts, or was there a coordinated effort for one singular issue?
Well,
start with your reflections on Bayard Rustin.
It's a real shame that he was kept so in the background. He was the power behind the throne all around, and I'm just so happy that now his name is out there, a movie, a book, all that type of thing, that we should all respect each other, I feel, no matter what an individual situation is. Now, what was the other part of that?
So how do we, where do we put our efforts today when there's so many fights?
Oh, okay. I say we can't take it all on. We have to pick the issue that we're most concerned with and get together with other people who feel that's also their big issue. Get a plan of action, all organized, have the phone number of a lawyer on us when we're out there acting. Always have your lawyer's phone number and get out there and do it. And never forget the power of the press. When stuff starts flying, they're in as much danger as you are, and sometimes they're the ones who are attacked first, like that TV photographer down in Jackson. You take your issue to the streets, the lawyers take it to the courts, but the press takes your issue to the world. So always remember and respect the power of the press.
I think one of the civil rights movement seemed very singular, right? That's in segregation and Jim Crow. And you had different organizations who had different tactics. The SNCC students, foot soldiers, let's just pound it into submission, right? Let's just make this happen, make ourselves so present and so annoyingly present that they have to confront this. Let's end this. NAACP, a little more passive. Let's work this thing through the system and the courts, right?
Take it to the courts.
Right. SCLC had their way, right? There's always different organizations beyond that, Divine Nine, for example, and the work that they were doing. But it's obviously, they knew what they were going after. And while they had different opinions about different things, they never put it out there in front of everybody. When they disagreed, it was behind the scenes. But their front was always forward, because they also knew that the enemy was really good at dividing people, right? Something we see today. The challenge, as you noted, we see so much more now today. Right? Not that those problems didn't exist then, but be it LGBTQ or immigration rights and so forth. We just see more of it now, and it's obviously more present. But we all have the same problem. He's in the White House. So we need to be focused on that. Not worrying about who gets credit for what, and there's a lot broader issues that individual groups have, but that point of intersectionality is we already know what needs to be done in regards of confronting this singular issue in our democracy right now. Because if we can't overcome that, nothing's going to change at that point. We have a dictatorship, it's done. It's going to take a lot more to move that mountain there. And so we need to be focused on that. And that really comes down to the vote. 2026. If we're not talking about 2026 now, we're done with. Because they are talking about 2026. Trust me, they're already planning everything they can. That's part of their Project 2025, is to secure 2026. We need to be focused on that, to make that a reality, to start pushing back against this atrocity. And we're seeing it, though. We are starting to see that, so we need to continue that.
It ain't over till it's over, as the saying goes.
Are there questions online at all?
Got another question here.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that at a young age, you really did display a lot of courage, dedication, and empathy towards others. And so I just want to say thank you for that.
And I did it for all of us.
Hello. I was going to ask, what do you say to people who have trouble finding connections between your work in the 60s and current events because they believe maybe it's not as bad as it was in the 60s and they're just not able to draw those lines? So what would you say to them to help them understand why the work is still prevalent and ongoing?
Well, we didn't get deported. The tactics, the issues have changed, but the basic problem is still there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you took care of legal segregation by law.
Yeah, but now we see all these other forms of discrimination.
So, yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, as I talk with other civil rights activists in my mom's years, you know, people are like, well, has anything changed? They're like, well, yeah, of course things have changed. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We don't have Jim Crow and segregation. You know, we obviously don't have slavery, right? I mean, even though it's still in the Constitution, mind you. But we do live in the now. This is our moment, and so we can't compare those two. This is very real for us, and so we need to make sure we're doing what we can do in our time. We can learn from the past and what they did. What they did was with mimeograph machines, with dimes in their pocket. Most people don't know where mimeographs are, you know, some of these young folks. But, I mean, they didn't have the technology they had. What they had was the passion and the people, right? And technology won't save you. It's the people, it's the power of the people. We, the people, will what make it happen.
In your book, Get Back to the Counter, there was an excerpt in it that talked about how you guys learned to protest by staying seated and being calm and all that. And I noticed it being brought back up for the No King protest. And, you know, like you were just saying with media now, we can get the word out about that and how to be safe. How did you guys do that back then and get it out to enough people to make it work?
We ran our mouths when we were with a group. And
letter writing campaigns. And,
yeah.
I mean, it was very much coordinated, but in particular, you had trainings. Like the Freedom Riders had their trainings and stuff. And how are you going to sit there at the lunch counters when you're getting attacked? I mean, they literally go through these scenarios of how you're going to, how you're going to respond nonviolently when you're getting abused. I think that's a lesson for us when we are in situations, when we see a wrong. How many of us actually, after the fact, go, man, I wish I would have said something. I wish I would have done something, right? Well, it's because we don't have the vocabulary, we don't have the actions ingrained in us yet, programmed to do those things. So we need to. We need to start training ourselves to how to engage. So when someone does something that we know is completely wrong, we need to be in that position to make it a right. And to be willing to put ourselves, to have that comfort level to put ourselves in that place, to stand in the gap, to sit at the lunch counter, if you will.
Thank you. I think out of the interest of time and respect everyone's time, we'll wrap it up. I'll hand it over to Loki for one last call to action.
Yeah. And
then hand it to Pastor Kate for the closing. Thank you.
So what can I do? We get this asked all the time. People want to know what they can do. Not everyone can do what my mom did. I don't even pretend that I can do what my mother did. My mom once said, I can't do everything, but I can do something, because doing nothing is not an option.
You can speak up and speak out.
Right. Our organization, we are doing the things that we can do in support of various communities for our HBCU micro scholarships, the educational material that we provide, and so forth. So people ask, what can I do? Well, in the civil rights movement, those who couldn't get on the front lines were ones who actually supported the front line.
And there were as many people that were supporters, cooking, putting people up overnight, raising money, getting the word out. There were as many people supporting as there were on the front lines.
Yeah. So one thing you can do is I challenge everyone here to donate $1 a month. Just, that doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot of a little is a lot. It makes a huge difference. This group right here could fund a scholarship on $1 a month. That's for an HBCU micro scholarship that we do. That's something you can do. And we can do that, you know, we have the books and everything else, but we can also do that donation back there, very simple. We have a tap and go, and it makes it real easy. So if you want to start helping make a difference, you can help us continue to make that difference. So, thank you.
Thank you again. As we prepare to end, I want to call your attention to the middle of the flyer that you hopefully received when you came in, where it says there, opportunities for action. Certainly consider joining this movement, donating to the Joan Trumpauer Mulholland Foundation and their scholarships. But there are also the book discussion. So there are copies there in the hallway for sale. If you would like to have an inscription, to have Joan to sign your book, there are cards there where you can write down your name, your inscription, and make the line move just a little bit faster, so folks can point those out to you as you go. But we will have two discussions about that book. That is a great way to keep yourself accountable. How many times have we bought a book and let it sit on your shelf? Don't do that. Buy the book, come for the discussion, then you will have to read it, right? So consider joining that discussion, and also a great place where you can meet people who are of like mind, who want to answer this question, what do we do today and now? Also, if you are not a book reader, but you are a person who likes to move, our anti-racism team will be doing one of the Alive furniture moving days. Even if you just move pillows, you can come and help to move, and so that date is there. God's Work Our Hands Day, that's a day of service for our whole church, and in fact, Lutherans across the country will be celebrating that day a little bit early. So we'll be making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, very easy thing to do. We'll have a similar discussion on September 7th, and later in the fall with two leaders. Mona Finch Elliott will come and lead a discussion on racism in the ELCA. That's our denomination that we're a part of, but applicable to all mainline Christian denominations about racism in our church institutions and how we can fight that. And then Dr. Justine Hill-Edwards will be coming. Patrick Anderson can tell you more about that, to lead on the Savings and Trust Bank and the rise and betrayal of the Freedmen's Bank, and how that happened, and a lot of misconceptions in that process. So lots of information there, but the basic message is don't leave today without being inspired to do something. If you got here a little late, I invited people at the very beginning to share your name. If you are a part of an institution, share where you came from or why you came today, and share why this is important. And we encourage you to continue doing that as we have a reception in the back. So don't do that right this second, but after Pastor Alex Stahl prays, I hope that the conversation is just as robust at the end now as it was at the beginning. And with that, I'll invite Pastor Stahl to come forward and to share with us. Pastor Stahl is a pastor of one of our neighboring congregations, but he called me and he said, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland has been a hero of mine for a long time. Can I come? And I said, yes, certainly you can come, and will you pray? So he'll pray for us to finish.
They say be careful when you meet a hero, because you might be asked to pray. I can remember, pardon me, pastor's privilege for just a second, but I can remember the very first political argument that I got into with my father. I was maybe 5 or 6. It was 1967, 68, fire hoses and dogs, and I said that's wrong. And I was told it wasn't. And I got put in my place. But I always knew that. So anyway, thank you for letting me share. Let us pray. God of justice, you have called us to be a people who stand for justice and for peace. We're grateful for the work of Joan as she has shared her experiences as an activist for justice and equality. May all that we have heard today be a catalyst for action. May our words, thoughts, and deeds lessen the likelihood of harm and empower others to take up the mantle of the prophet. Let us show up in the cause of liberation, our hearts turned toward you, who made all and who loves all. Let your Spirit guide us in truth as we seek to lead our communities, our congregations, and our nation to embody the principles of liberty and justice for all. We're also grateful for the work of Loki as he labors to tell the stories from the past and to ensure that its lessons are not lost as we seek a way to a just future. Bless us now as we go our separate ways this evening, and keep us mindful of the need to remain united in service to those who need your love and the good news. Help us to live in the hope that another world is possible. As this day ends, see us safely to our homes, give us rest, and bring us together again in commitment to your justice. We make this prayer in the name of all that is good and holy and beautiful. Amen.